Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for a Better Government Association exclusive, an interview with the Mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, on good government issues, fairness, accountability, integrity, transparency, honesty, and efficiency. I'm Andy Shaw, President and CEO of the BGA, and if you don't know, we are a nonpartisan, apolitical watchdog organization that shines a light on government and holds public officials accountable. Mayor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This is one of a series of conversations I understand the mayor is going to have on key public policy issues. This kicks off the series. 3.5 years ago, the mayor sat down with us and we talked about some of these same issues. He had been in office only 100 days then. So much of what he had to say then was aspirational, things he was hoping to do. Well, here we are 3.5 years later, and there are some results. So today we're going to look at promises made, promises kept, and promises yet to be fulfilled, which I'm sure he will tell us he plans to fulfill, at least the ones that make sense. And let me start on something that I know is critically important to you, and that is the so-called Shackman Decree. For 40 years, the city of Chicago and Cook County has been laboring under restrictions related to unfair hiring, firing, and promotional policies. Hiring, firing, and promotion done on the basis of politics, not merit. And over these past 3.5 years, there have been some dramatic changes, which for the most part have gotten the city out from under the Shackman Decree. In other words, the court has said effectively that politics has been relatively or almost fully wrung out of the personnel system. You deserve a shout out for that. Watson, our watchdog, who you'll meet later, apparently thinks that was a significant achievement. But I know you're here today to tell us that there is one new component of that essentially finishes off the Shackman litigation.
Well, it finishes off the Shackman, you're right, litigation. It also finishes 40 years of Shackman-like effort where at least for the last decade and a half, the federal court finally took over oversight of city hiring. The Park District has now come in compliance with the Shackman Decree, and so it completes both the City of Chicago, city government, City Council, and the sister agencies. And really what it does say, Andy, in most simple terms, I think, for the public, because sometimes this stuff can get a little antiseptic and removed, which is we used to hire in the City of Chicago for the last 40 years. It was based on who you knew, not what you knew. We decided to enter the 21st century, and now what you know is more important than who you knew. Now, all of that says a couple things. One, we're from underneath the Shackman Decree. Two, they think we have professionalized the practices on our hiring. And also, it's an acknowledgement that there is a political will by the mayor and the mayor's office to see that through. It's a trust, but I also believe they verify because we've made the changes. And I really got to be honest, best practices were also the most efficient and most cost-saving. We spent millions of dollars for legal expenses, time lost because of the federal oversight, and I really do think it's an acknowledgement that from start to finish, we ended in the last 4 years what has been troubling the city for the last 40 years.
Well, congratulations. And let me go on to something else.
That's also both. I appreciate the congratulations, sure. But it goes to everybody. And, you know, there was Michael Shackman, the judge. There was also the IG, Inspector General was part of this. And so that effort is an acknowledgement of all the work that went into it. But in the last 3.5 years, we have gotten something done that nobody thought was possible in the city. And we still need to execute, although the acknowledgement of removing Shackman is an acknowledgement that they trust that we're going to do it because they've seen our work to date.
Oh, speaking of executing something that was perhaps a mistake and a problem, for the past 6 years we've been bedeviled by the parking privatization deal, which you called a big lemon. You and your team
I think I said some other things, but this is a family show.
Right.
So,
well, behind closed doors, I'm sure you did. You and your team did negotiate some changes which are favorable in the long term financially. But sitting in mothballs for the last 3 years has been a privatization ordinance, which in the eyes of the BGA and others would codify a set of regulations, prohibitions, and strictures to keep something like that from ever happening again. That was bottled up in the Rules Committee for more than a year, and even today, more than 2 years later, there still hasn't been a city council hearing on that, and I'm wondering what the problem is.
Well, we have a lot of work, but let me explain what we're going to do.
Sure.
Okay, part of this is both what we did and what we're going to do, and the Shackman thing for the Park District just was announced now. First, let's start with the parking meter deal. Because usually we have a lot of divisions in the city. I've never seen a deal bring the city together like that, in opposition. I made a pledge in the last campaign that while the $1 billion was spent, and we'd have $1 billion, so we were going to renegotiate and bring the new owners and operators to the table. We closed a giant loophole, which is called the true-up cost, but was going to cost the city north of $1 billion. Shut that down. The second thing is we returned free parking on Sundays to about 80% of the neighborhoods throughout the city of Chicago, and also made the company adopt the best practices, which was pay by cell. Something other cities have done, and a little over 100,000 people have already adopted it, and it's rapidly growing. So on weather like today or this evening, if it's raining, snowing, cold, you can pay by cell. Even if it's not, you can pay by cell. And more than 100,000 people have availed them of that new service.
But we still don't have the ordinance.
I know I was giving you a dramatic build-up to it.
Okay.
Okay. Second is, in my tenure, when it came to selling, leasing, or privatizing Midway, whichever adjective we use those interchangeably, although they mean different things, I set up and impaneled a group of people to study that, which is, did it have merit? I rejected privatizing or selling Midway. What I am going to do going forward is two things. One, so it's not just by the whim of a mayor. I'm going to codify that. So anytime anybody ever looks at anything again, you have to impanel a group to study it, evaluate it, and come up with the recommendations, good, bad, whatever, and to codify a time for the city council then to evaluate the actual, if it's recommended to go forward, to have the time to then evaluate, kick the tires on the deal and the transaction. And the reason I say that is both out of the parking meter, which we didn't do anything on Midway because I rejected it. Many people, and Alderman Moore is here with us today in the audience, but he was here at the time, that felt rushed. They didn't have the time. So both aspects will be codified.
So just to be clear, they're going to be codified in a new ordinance you'll propose as opposed to just bringing the old one back out?
Yeah, but it would be based on what we did on Midway, so it is official for the city. It exists. It doesn't exist by whether I have the right intent or another mayor has the right intent, but it will be codified into the law for the city, and that's the process you're going to have to follow. Gives city council and the public time, and it also gives a outside group to evaluate, as I had impaneled this group to evaluate whether the contract made sense, whether the actual effort made sense, and also not just that you are, if you decide to go forward, how the resources are going to be used. When you look back at the parking meter, there's a number of things that were wrong. One, the deal. Two, what happened with the resources. We had paid, I do take pride in this, in our budget, we've put money back into the rainy day fund, about $45 million over the last 4 years. And in the past, they used the resources to pay ongoing expenses. We've made that change. And then the third piece that people had trouble was the rushing of judgment on good or bad on the deal itself. So those aspects will, like we did in the Midway, be codified so it's not based on my intent, but it will be the city law.
And when will this be proposed? The next couple of months, you think?
Yeah, we'll do it in the next city council. Next city council, that's going to be one of the goals here is to have, what am I going to do in the next term? And that will be one of the goals.
I think the term Inspector General's come up a couple times with respect to Shackman. I know the IG was looking at the parking meter deal. You turned a very rocky relationship with Joe Ferguson into what seems to be a very positive relationship now, in which you reached an agreement to keep him on past the first term. You worked very cooperatively with him on the whole Shackman process, and there seems to have been a rapprochement after what I called the rocky beginning.
That's a big word there, Andy.
But let me ask you the other question, which is that still unsettled is how to monitor the city council. And I know you don't control it, but people do look to you for guidance. There was talk that maybe Joe Ferguson, with his power and reach, should have control over city council. There's been a lot of unhappiness with the Faisal Khan regime, its lack of reach and power and budget. He sued you for not giving him enough money. How should that be resolved so that the council, from which more than 30 people have gone to jail since 1970 for corruption, so that that council can be held accountable and watched more closely?
Yeah. Well, there's two parts to your question, so let me do this. Let's deal on the first part of the Inspector General. We do have a good working relationship. 12 of his, I think a dozen, even a little more, of his recommendations we've adopted. And when I say adopted, I'm not talking about just other for things wrong, but in our most recent budget, he recommended selling city-owned parking garages and lots. It's going to garner about $10 million. So we've taken their record. That's an example. There's other things. Although I was for grid garbage, it was also a recommendation turning our garbage collection into a grid system, something they recommended. Ending free water for not-for-profits, something we adopted. So there was a dozen, if not more, things, specific things. The working relationship is a good working relationship. He has a different role than I did. We had an honest meeting where I said I contributed, I will take responsibility for why I contributed to it not being always conducive. He did the same, and we're in a space where I strongly support an IG to also continue to identify efficiencies, identify waste, fraud, and abuse, and give us recommendations. And we use that. I think he knows that. So we're appreciative of the work. We've put a floor on his budget, so it's independent of anything else going on fiscally for the city that he can never go below. We've given him that type of independence. And just most recently, we're going to expand his authority into the Public Building Commission. Now, shift over. The one thing that's clear about the City Council, we have made a series of reforms on ethics, revolving door for City Council members and their staff, a whole series of things that have changed.
The no hire list.
The no hire list. Not to bring Chapman up again, but when we got under the federal oversight, the City Council wasn't part of it, and Michael Chapman and others said they could not get the City Council. In fact, Nicole said that.
The monitor, Nicole.
Yeah, the monitor.
Brennan,
I apologize, yes. And a month later, the next City Council, the City Council adopted the Chapman decree. And so that's why I can say today with the parking district, it's complete. So the City Council has been part of a series of cultural reforms, and it's always a work in progress. It's never kind of a point on a map that you reach. Now, I have encouraged, and not only encouraged, I told the City Council you have to have an Inspector General. They have raised Mr. Khan's budget. There's been stories about that budget, its use, and where the resources have gone. I've also told the City Council that I do believe that the Inspector General, i.e. Joe Ferguson, should be the Inspector General not just for the city, but also for the City Council.
with the same power and authority and reach.
I've said that and I support it. Now, let me also say, I get criticized when the City Council is a rubber stamp, and now I'm being told make them a rubber stamp. There are others.
Make them a rubber stamp for the good things.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's the good things in your eyes.
Correct.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
From a good government standpoint.
I got it. Well, the fact is, I've pushed them, and I'm clear about where I stand. Let me say one thing. The City Council is not going back to the days where there's no Inspector General. I told them that's unacceptable, and nobody's even talking about that. There will be an Inspector General, and there will be an Inspector General for City Council, because there are no barriers to reform, and there is no area, do not trespass, as it requires to reform. There are voices that are resistant to doing it to Ferguson. I'm clear that that's where I stand, and I believe that should be done. We're not done working through the issues, but I'm making my effort for that, and there are other elements of the City Council that are pushing back, but I believe it's the right thing to do.
Okay, let's switch to transparency. And I know you're going to you have a favorable announcement you want to make, but let me ask you a couple of tougher questions first. You have probably put more data online than almost any mayor in America. You get credit for making an awful lot more information transparent. And yet, we've had to file multiple lawsuits against your administration for failing to turn over documents under Freedom of Information. We've sued the police department a couple times, the Board of Education, the Park District, Animal Control, and these are over basic requests for documentation. Now, I understand we talked before you came downstairs, and every one of those doesn't come to your desk, presumably. But without knowing the details of the lawsuits, what can you say about a situation where it feels like there's a real attempt to not disclose basic information when it's asked for, that you only disclose what you want to, but not what others want you to?
Well, let me say a couple things. I don't know every particular.
Right.
If I knew every particular FOIA, I'd be the corp counsel and I wouldn't be the mayor. Okay? So I don't know all of them, and I don't know what you've asked for. Right. I do believe that the data we're making available is not just at what I want to make available. So if we're making, one of the few mayors we hold up in mayoral offices for making all information available that we can, and it's a fair question, is it only the ones I want to make available? What we are going to do in the next term, and I want to get to, is we're going to allow my data portal. So you can customize as a citizen what you want to be informed about from a data information and the data that we're making available, so you can also get updates on that. So there will be a My Data portal, and you'll get the information. You're interested in city services. That's what you want to know about. You're interested in police reports. That's what you'll get updated, and you can make multiple things. You'll create your own data portal. That's so people get, all these efforts are about not only giving people more information, full stop, that's what it's about, it is also giving them a sense that they have an access to city government rather than it be oblique to them. We'll be doing that also with 311 on the services and making that information more available so people know what's going on in their neighborhood and whether they want to have that type of service or thing for their efforts. As it relates to the FOIAs, I don't know the particular efforts. I do know what our spirit is to work through the issues and work through getting people the information. I will take away from this that I will go inquire in the oh so gentle way that I inquire about your particular request, but it really shouldn't be about, I don't want to have a situation that the only way you get a response is because you were able to ask the mayor here. So I don't know the particulars. If there is a way that, and this is always the challenge between those outside and us holding information. I don't know the particulars, and there may actually be good government reasons why certain information is not made public from a series of privacy things. So without knowing the specifics, you have my commitment to check in on
I appreciate
BGA.
that. Let me ask you a key accountability question. I know you're going to have a conversation among these 4 or 5 conversations over the next month.
Some will be speeches. This one's starting off with, some will be just straight out policy speeches with documents.
Public safety is on your list, but I'm not going to ask you deep questions about law enforcement, but there is one question that relates to a significant BGA investigation. We looked at 10 years of payouts for excessive force in the city of Chicago, and we came up with an absolutely shocking figure that the city of Chicago in 10 years has paid out $500 million to settle police brutality lawsuits, and only 12% of those stem from the Burge unit, where most of the publicity is gone. And obviously,
only 12% of the
12% of the 500 million, which is about 75 million of the 500 million. And I know that you were not around for most of those 10 years. But
I wasn't even a resident for some of them.
Well, some people still don't think. Some people still don't think you're a resident.
I had to do that. I apologize.
But no. But let me just.
We're putting the dog to sleep. This is kind of bad. Go ahead.
I put him to sleep.
Yeah. Okay.
My question, though, is, knowing that, what kind of commitment have you made? I know you talk to McCarthy all the time. Law enforcement's maybe the top thing on your agenda at all times. What can and should be done to change that culture at the police department that tends to think that force is not just legitimate, but that covering up the force and protecting the rank and file is more important than accountability?
Actually, there's a couple things. I'm actually glad you brought up the public safety or police with the transparency you did earlier, because one of the things we did under my tenure, and it's been bedeviling the city for a decade, if not more, was police misconduct cases. We made that information, one of the first police departments, we just did it, I think, about 5 months ago. We made that information not only available, but that it will be on an ongoing basis available. So it's part of also that transparency.
Right.
And that's also, Andy, information that you would have to in the past FOIA. We're now worked through that issue, and it's being held up as a model of making that information public. To your particular question, you have 2 parts that I would say I will take away that I don't know, let's just say, I don't know whether you're right about the $500 million.
Well, I think we're right about the numbers. We just can't prove why.
Let's just say direction, you're not off by $500 million.
Right.
Okay, so it's not 0. Okay, so directionally you're right. On the Burge thing, went and said, we got to close the chapter, close this book. It is a horrible period on the Chicago. It's a stain on our city. And I've tried to make amends for something not only that does predate me. That said, the first thing to do on police cases is to do better training and better transparency. And both have been put in place. We've changed our training. In most recent cases, we made public about that we train against the chokehold. And that has been done in place for years. We've made information about police or police actions fully transparent. We have an outside police board, IPRA. Every shooting, I know you asked me about chokehold, goes there automatically. It's kicked to an outside. And in fact, last week when the Attorney General was here, he noted Chicago's outside board is maybe something they want to publicize from a national standpoint, so other police boards other police departments can't do it just internally. They have to have a citizen board. To the settlements, I don't have a specific answer for you, but I will, not that I'm going to put it ahead of the FOIA homework assignment you've given me, but if it's directionally correct, we have, not that we don't, and I have always known the settlements we had done, I'm going to go look into that specifically.
Thank you. Well, I have one more transparency question that I was going to ask you previously, so let me go back to it just for a second. Your administration was sued a couple times by the Tribune for hesitating or stalling and turning over information about your schedule. You put out a schedule every day of a couple public events, but there is one school of thought that people ought to know who you're meeting with pretty much all the time, because that influences who you're getting input from and who you're listening to. It helps taxpayers and others understand where the influences come to the decisions you make. And yet that's been something that public officials other places have been a little more forthcoming about. And I'm wondering if you have any plan to be a little more revealing in your day-to-day scheduling, maybe on a monthly basis or a bi-monthly basis. I don't think people need to know every single day in real time, but it would be kind of nice to sort of see where you spend your time, because that says a lot about how you govern.
Well, they put out my schedule, and they put out what's on my schedule. And as it relates to how much they put out everything that I do on a public basis. And that's what they make available. Should I also put out where I'm going to go on vacation? I'm now for it. I'm joking. We just had to do that. So. No,
but you don't think that the meetings you have during the day ought to be...
I have no idea what I got to be honest. I don't know what they put out about my schedule. So I'm sure they put out what is important or essential about the schedule. And that's what's available.
Well, let me offer a piece of advice, which I'm sure you'll ignore, but I offered in the spirit of actually helping with a perception issue that you've been battling, and some of the polling suggested a few months or a year ago, which is that you're not as well connected with the average Chicagoan.
And you think my schedule would...
Well, what I'm saying is, I think if your schedule suggests that you're spending a lot more time with Wall Street than Main Street, that maybe you ought to change that.
Yeah, but well, here's the thing, Andy. Appreciate that. Well, I don't really care what that said a year ago, 6 months ago, or whatever. Look, I take the train in twice a week. We don't put it on my schedule. And trust me, I interact with a lot of people on the train.
I think people should know that, though.
Well, I got that. I would also like to be able to just take the train, and then the people on the trains, rather than have people meet you to do something else. So, that's disruptive to everybody else, too. I often do what I refer to, this goes back to my days as Congress on your corner, but as mayor, I continue this, which is for the whole tenure, what I call Walmart walk-ins, Mariano meetings. I walk the Target town halls. I walk through grocery stores, and sometimes it's not on the schedule because I got a half an hour between events, and I just go to the most recent grocery store and just walk through. That's so people can come up and just talk to you about things that are happening in their neighborhood, things that are going on. Sometimes it's just take a photo with my kid, they go to this school, but I've had people tell me different things along the way that I've then taken. I presently, since Labor Day, continue to shake hands at L stops and Gesundheit, and do that. So there are things on my schedule that I'll tell them we have an extra half hour, go to this school, so I just go see it. And those don't ever appear on the schedule, not because I'm trying to hide it, because we do things all the time, in the neighborhood, in the community, that I want to be able to go do. Now, I'll give you most recently. I make a habit and I don't like it, of trying to reach out to every parent who's had a child lost to gun violence or been affected by it. And a lot of times I just then invite them when everybody's healthy to come into the office. I don't put it on a schedule. You weren't with me when I went and visited Dolores, because it's not my right to invite you. I had to ask her first even if she wanted me at her home. And I don't think it's my right to invite you and then make her loss a media event. And I know you're not in the media anymore.
Well, that's a good argument. You could do it a month later, though.
Well,
You could
no,
hand it out on
I
the
understand.
lawn.
This is where we're going to disagree, and that's
Sure.
okay. You're at 2 homework assignments. You're just not going to get the third.
Okay.
If Dolores, given it's her pain, her loss, wants to do that, that's her right. I'm not going to do it. I'm visiting her as a parent, because I don't understand how she went through, and I don't understand how her, Annette Holt, Pam Bosley, Cleo Pendleton, I'm in total awe of these women, how they put one foot in front of the other. I would be recoiled around so much anger. And I try to go there to comfort them, because you're a father, I'm a father. Our biggest thing is to make sure our kids are safe and on their way. And your most vulnerable moment, I don't want them to know that they're alone. I want them to know there's somebody that loves them, is with them. And that's not for you.
Okay.
Now, the general point you have, we put our schedule out, we do a lot of meetings, but there's a lot of things that never appear on my schedule, not because we're trying to hide it, it's because I'll just be on my way and I'll go do it. There's many mornings that says we're going to the office, and I said I'm taking the train. And it doesn't appear on the schedule. I'm not trying to hide it from you, I'm just trying to get to work on time.
Let's head off the emotional to a more practical thing that has to do with scheduling and planning and process. There was concern that when you had no public budget hearings in the neighborhood last year after having had 3 the year before. There's concern that the Lucas Museum may be fast-tracked more than it should, that the school closings didn't have enough public input, that too many decisions get made without enough regular folks weighing in. Do you think it's a fair criticism, or do you think it's something that is manufactured and that you do trust the process to be deliberative?
No, I don't. You always got to challenge a process. That's just as directionally. I challenge it all the time. But that said, let's go through that. One is on the budget. We have done things through technology. So I've done town halls on it. I talk to people about it. We also put information out. We also solicit ideas. There's different ways of doing it. Doesn't mean because it was done 20 years ago, has to be done the same way this time. And next year, maybe some changes to it. Some years we've done town halls with technology. Some years we've done budgets with a Q&A with media people about the budget. And then my most important thing is, A, to solicit ideas, and then the city council holds an open process after I make my proposals of things that they want to do. And they hold a series of open meetings about it. So there's an iterative process, and we start on that process in the summer by the time it also contributes. We can make it public, rather. 2, I impaneled a group, a wide range of people around Lucas. They had a series of meetings throughout the city. Now we're in the early stages of the next process, and they're still continuing the community meetings and interactive. I've laid out what I think. That process is now ongoing. I think that the Lucas Museum, like Adler, like Field, and like Shedd, would be an incredible contribution to the educational, cultural enrichment of the city. There'll be clear economic benefits, and will help the city attract, and not just tourists, but most importantly, help on the STEM education we're trying to do. There was a process that was over a couple months with a lot of public input, and now there's an ongoing process, an iterative process still, and that process has also just started. So we're in the early stages. And then, the takeaway, I suppose, is when we come to things like Midway or Lucas, and even on the schools, there was an impaneled group led by Frank Clark. They had a series of meetings, and it's required. I think there's over 90 neighborhood meetings. I'm doing that by guess, so this is not a challenge. It may have been 89, and the mayor said 90, and it was only 89. But a series of meetings. I often ask people to come together, work on a task force to then, as we work through the issues, and have a series of meetings with the public on an ongoing basis. We did it on the minimum wage. And the real lesson, Andy, is if you go back, rather than, no disrespect about the way I'm going to say this to you, rather than make a casual off the comment that we're not engaged in discussion, is in every one of these issues, minimum wage, Midway, Lucas, we have put together a task force, a cross-section of people to then work on the issue and hear and solicit ideas, and they have a series of neighborhood meetings and community meetings across the city, and then come back with that recommendation. So in all fairness, while I'm not going to get an A from you, I actually think exactly what you're asking is in one variation or another actually being done. And I'd ask you, rather than look at it from your old paradigm, oh, you didn't do a budget hearing, maybe there's an example through technology, we've adopted it in a new format, exactly the input you want to look at.
Technology is good, but probably about a quarter of the city still isn't wired, and those people can't really benefit from that.
I don't really want to argue about it.
Right.
But the fact is, it's not the only tool, but it's a tool we've
Sure.
interested. But I'm also saying there's a task force model that I've looked at. It's not perfect, but it starts a process where not one opinion, a group of people are put together to give you a best idea after they've solicited a series of ideas from across the city. Now you may say that's not, here's what it's missing, but it's different than what has been done in the past, a la, I don't mean to do this, but parking meter versus Midway.
Fine.
Okay, well, it's different in the sense of what has happened in, I really don't want to do this, but Children's Museum versus how I did the Lucas. And so I'd ask you to actually look at what we've done from a fresh set of eyes and not colored by assuming if the mayor did it, it's not open and honest.
Let's talk about
And
tax
solicitous.
Let's talk about tax increment financing, the famous acronym TIF. You made a lot of pledges during the campaign to reform TIF, and again, you do get a fair shout out for much more information online. It's much more transparent. We can understand a lot better where the money is going. But the basic criticism of TIF that dogged your predecessor continues to fall on your shoulders. You can tell me whether it's fair or unfair, because TIF was created by the state to create economic development in blighted areas, and yet there are TIF dollars for the expansion of Walter Payton, for the construction of the new selective enrollment high school that will no longer be named Obama, for the hotel in the McCormick Place area, which is being constructed by a group that is not in desperate need of a subsidy. And I'm just wondering, it feels as if the basic philosophy of TIF has not returned to its early intent.
Well, I don't mean to, I suppose I like the question order only in this sense. Early on, I did make a set of pledges. I put it paneled and a task force together. One of the recommendations was to make information more available, more transparent. We've followed through on that. Right. Again, it was a series of, a cross-section of people, experts and others, to give ideas. We've also have, for the first time, a policy as it relates to TIF surpluses. I've ended 12 of them, either we've run out or we've shut them down. So there's a series of things we've done. Now let me do one piece of education. There's a connotation around TIFs. The lion's share of TIF dollars throughout the city go to schools, new modernization, a direct investment in your neighbor's economic quality and economic environment. The next big item is public transportation and parks, two other contributors to the quality of life in your neighborhoods. And as your neighborhoods, our city. And so I would say this is directionally almost a little north of 80% of all TIF dollars go into public entities, schools, parks, transportation, other things that improve the quality of life of our neighborhoods throughout the city of Chicago. I think that's exactly what, and they're throughout the city of Chicago. Now, to the particular of the hotel, one of our goals is there's a TIF around McCormick Place, because McCormick Place is a driver of economic growth in what you want to have in the far south loop area and extending into Bronzeville. And I reformed McCormick Place when I came here, McCormick Place was 5th in convention business. It's now 2nd. We've created over 10,000 jobs in the hospitality industry. And because McCormick Place reforms, forcing and dealing with in a respectful way both the Teamsters and carpenters, they removed their lawsuits. We addressed all their issues. We extended the agreement to the electrical workers and the stagehands. We're winning business that used to go to Vegas. We signed $6 billion of contracts. And one of the goals we have is to create, because of the convention business, they want more hotels on the campus. There's going to be about 10,000 jobs that are going to be created, building the new hotels with the new CERMAC station that we're opening up, which is also a TIF, right next there. And it actually, that economic growth pays tax dollars into the city of Chicago from tourists that go right back into meeting the basic services of our city.
So my takeaway here is that most of the media attention is focused on the projects that maybe are controversial, while most of the money, you say, is going where it should.
I think if you go through it, the lion's share of the dollars, 80 of what we've done, 80% of them go into public investments in the neighborhoods throughout the city of Chicago, libraries, parks, transportation. The biggest one is schools. And these actually improve the quality of life and the economic vitality of our neighborhood economy. I don't know if we got how much time we got, but I do want to say one other thing we're going to make.
Two more questions.
Okay.
And one is...
I have one more answer.
Okay. Well, let me just ask you a quick budget question, because even though the fiscal issues tend to fall more in the purview of the Civic Federation and other groups, I think fiscal integrity is important. And I know you were left a pretty big financial mess, and you've tried in a variety of ways to get that under control, but you haven't been able to break the habit of the borrowing and the gimmickry, at least according to the Tribune's analysis, that creates increasing piles of debt for future generations. Is there a path back to structural stability for this city? And
Sure.
If so, is it something that can be explained in layman's terms?
Well, yeah, well, here it is. When I came to office, our annual budget deficit was $600 million a year and going north, and we were using rainy day money or surplus, rainy day funds to meet budget obligations. For 4 years, we have balanced the budget without any property sales or gas tax increase, and for 4 years in a row, we put money back into the rainy day fund. We've taken that structural deficit from $600 million a year to below $300 through tough decisions, making structural reforms. And we eliminated the per employee head tax. We didn't cut it, we eliminated it. No tax increases on property sales or gas tax, balanced budgets 4 years in a row, increases in after-school, summer jobs, early childhood, and basic neighborhood services. We also have done and dealt with our pensions as it relates to both the laborers and municipal. I did not say that in 3.5 years I was going to change all the past, but we have changed directionally where we're going, and we're making fundamental different choices that get us to the place where we need to be from both meeting the needs of the city and its future while doing it in a very fiscally responsible way. And in fact, in the most recent case, and dealing with healthcare costs, the Civic Federation noted the tough decisions we have made it. They've noted the tough decisions we made at the community colleges. They've noted the tough decisions we made at the CTA. They have noted the tough decisions at the Park District at the boards. We have more work to do throughout the city, but if you look at their recommendations across the board at every one of those budgets, they have said that these are the better practices and actually on a more fiscally responsible step. So it's not one budget, it's across the waterfront. We have more challenges. You're not going to make wholesale changes like that. And here's my larger point. We had a big problem in our budget. We also had a problem where people and businesses were fleeing the city. I said that if we do the tough things, the necessary things to ensure our future, people and companies will come back. City of Chicago is now the #1 city for corporate relocations. City of Chicago is the #1 city families are moving into. And City of Chicago is the #1 city for direct foreign investment. And today, with China making one of the largest real estate developments with 2,000 jobs to come of it, it accentuates that type of investment. All because people know we're making the necessary and tough decisions to ensure our future. If you did what I think others had advocated, slash and burn the budget, you'd have thrown the economy into a recession and had direct, here in the city of Chicago, direct consequences given we were just beginning to emerge out of it. Other people suggested the opposite. Don't touch anything in the city budget, just raise taxes. That too would have had a dire set of consequences. I think we've found a different way of making structural reforms, not raise taxes, and then help the economy continue to grow, although we have a lot more work to do. So I wholesale reject the idea of some that have restricted either raise taxes and don't worry about anything else, or slash and burn the budget and don't worry about the consequences on people's lives. And the net result is a growing, healthier economy with people having the confidence to come back to the city of Chicago. And that's the approach, and we've not only done it around the city, that's exactly what we've done on the parks budget, exactly what we've done on the library budget, exactly what we've done on the CTA. The CTA, classic example. They have eliminated a structural deficit, and they have also delivered better services, and they have never gone down to Springfield 3 years in a row or any 1 year and asked for a bailout because they haven't done the tough things they needed to do. And each one of those are of a piece of a strategy of what we have followed, which is both a cut and reform agenda.
So indulge me in two quick questions. You have always been an outstanding fundraiser for yourself and others, and I'm wondering, I'm not questioning the amount of money you have in a campaign fund, you have to run races. Would you like to see additional reforms in campaign finance that could impact you and others? There's the only movement afoot now, post-Citizen United, is the so-called small ball movement of little pieces of campaign finance reform here and there. I know you've imposed limits. Some have said you find ways around them. But what can we do about the system, or just leave it alone?
No, I mean, look, I worked for President Clinton trying to work through the campaign finance reform of what is known as McCain-Feingold, and I'm a big supporter of it. As you know, the courts have undone a lot of that. I made some changes by both executive order and then by ordinance here in the city of Chicago. One thing to throw back, you're no longer in the media, but for the moment now you're going to just wear that jersey here. What drives campaign candidates running for office is advertising. And I've never heard a part of the discussion about maybe the media offering that free. You want to have an honest discussion about what drives campaigns, those, you used to work at ABC, you think they give you 20 ads free every week to all the candidates?
I will tell you, by way of full disclosure, I always thought they should, but they paid my salary and I had to be quiet.
Oh, well, okay. Thanks for the courage. I really want to thank you.
I wasn't running.
Nothing for political reform. Really appreciate it there, Andy.
I had a family to raise.
I got to do, oh, really? So there's calculations to honesty. That's great. Okay, thanks. That was a freebie. That felt so good. That was like therapy.
You gave me a lot of shots when I used to be in the business anyway.
But so here's the thing. So there are changes and reforms to, I mean, the most important thing is on the campaign finance to give people a set of rules and confidence that the relationship between government and campaigns are separate. And we work at that and we follow the rules individually. I have one other thing I want to know. I don't know if what you want to, because I want to talk about my future agenda.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. So let me just ask it one way and you answer it any way you want. Assuming that you have more time to finish the job, what tops your list of fiscal and ethical reforms that are still undone and should be at least moved forward?
Right.
And if you want to go somewhere else, feel free, but I'm asking you about our wheelhouse, which is fiscal and ethical reform.
Yeah, well, there are other things fiscal. Let me at least deal with political reform here.
Sure.
I talked about my data portal. You know we've now completed the task of Shackman. I expect, though, when I say complete, there's the execution part, and they have at least voted the courts with the confidence that we have the right mindset. Again, these are a set of laws. My most important thing is to continue to change the culture. I include not just who you knew to what you know, but what used to happen on absenteeism, to the culture of public service, that it's an honor to work for the public and we have a responsibility to deliver a service. So whether that's picking up garbage, doing recycling, doing best practices, but knowing that you serve the public. And that is a change in the culture which won't be done just because the federal judge said, you have met my requirements as it relates to Shackman. In addition, as you know, the procurement office in the city of Chicago years ago had a federal investigation.
Yep.
Just a couple weeks ago, Jamie Rhee, the head of procurement, and the Inspector General's office was out in New York and presenting kind of best practices. Now, fast forward, we've started to make a series of changes at procurement. When the bid process is over, we give that information public so people know who was the lowest bid, et cetera. We've also done more online. By 2016, all $2 billion of purchasing and procurement by the City of Chicago will be done online. First, it will be paperless, so there's an efficiency. Second, it will be totally transparent. And third, it will be in real time so people can watch and know what everybody's bidding. And I want to, there's been a change in procurement. I don't think 8 years ago, 10 years ago, people would have thought the City of Chicago would be out in New York with the Inspector General's office being a test case of the reforms in place and best practices in good government. But I want to take it further, and I want the entire department to go e-procurement online so it has both the transparency, best practices, but also greatest efficiencies and savings for the public and the taxpayers.
So you'll be able to see a contract moving from concept to execution in real time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say, you will see it as, it will be done e-procurement, so when we put out a bid, you can watch it. I've seen it myself on one situation where they're sending in bids, they'll be doing it online, so we can know what Shaw Construction's bidding versus a manual construction, and then you can decide right then and there, you want to go a little lower, you can go a little lower.
I think I know who gets that contract.
The dog.
Anyway, listen, do you want a final word, or are you good?
No, I think, I do want a final word in this sense. There's a lot we have done. I would say this 3 years ago, I think I said this, I announced a little over, 3.5 years ago in this building, the endorsement of David Hoffman, and laid out a specific political reform agenda.
Former Inspector General.
Former Inspector General.
And a member of the Better Government Association Board.
And I've laid out a series of, and I've done a series of things, not just Shackman, not only the ethics reforms that I pledged to do, then I impaneled a group, another task force, to come up with a series of recommendations, and we have systematically made those reforms. We reappointed and made different appointments to the ethics board. We changed the revolving door process and policy as it relates to the city, and this is an ongoing process. There are a series of things that I want to do next term to specific information so it's more transparent to the individual. There's also more information we want to do and transparent as it relates to procurement, actually where the tax money gets spent, and I think this online will be part of that. Now, this is all also, when I was a congressman, Marty Meehan out of Massachusetts, myself, Senator Barack Obama, and Senator Russ Feingold from Wisconsin introduced the lobbying and ethics reform legislation in 2005. So this is a part of a set of life work, and it's not a point of we've hit good government. It's an ongoing effort to always directionally make the changes and reforms necessary to make government more transparent, hold us more accountable to the public and the taxpayers that pay the bills, and also ultimately give them the confidence that what we're doing is in the public interest. And each of these steps are a brick in building that wall of honesty, integrity, what you want to see, best practices, what I want to see. And there'll be days you'll disagree how far we've gone, but know that it's a serious effort to get there, and we think we have a set of things that we want to get done, and from 311 to data, individualizing data portal, to doing the procurement online, and continue to make the reforms necessary throughout the city government and cultural reform so people understand why they're there and who they're serving.
Mayor, we all appreciate you taking the time and answering the questions. We have a takeaway gift for you, which you don't have to declare because it's only worth, what, $3? This is our Shining a Light on Government pen. You can use it to shine it in the faces of your staff members when they don't give you the right answer. But it's a pen, it's a stylus on the other end, and it's it actually writes while you can sign things with it. This is to take with you on vacation. I won't say where you're going.
That's okay.
I want to wish you happy holidays, and the final thing before we let everyone go is there's someone who's been dying to meet you. We have a new member of the Watchdog team, and his name is Watson. Can we bring Watson up? Watson is our watchdog in chief. He is the new mascot of the Better Government Association. We got him in a partnership.
You didn't have a task force come up with the idea,
No, actually, we got him through a partnership with Paws Chicago, which is a wonderful organization. This is Gabe McDougall, his adoptive father, And Watson is going to come with us to a lot of BGA events. He's our mascot. You know, you might even see him in an ad on a CTA bus or train. Forrest Claypool would enjoy that.
Yeah. Can I make one this unsolicited piece of advice on the other side?
Based on...
Not based on the dog, I just thought about it, though. One of the challenges about, quote unquote, the whole good government agenda is it too often gets removed from people's daily lives. And it's a game of gotcha. I think you would find a more cooperative process from those of us in public life if it's made more relevant to people's lives and not made so distant from them that it's only a small group of people that care about it. So there's more political support for the reforms that Alderman Moore and myself are always trying to push.
That's a great piece of advice, and that's one of the reasons we got Watson. Because
I just want to make sure you had a homework assignment as much as I do.
I hear you, and I'm hoping Watson connects us to a whole group of people who may not be paying attention to us, because he should appeal to younger folks and dog owners and dog lovers, and but that's advice well offered and well taken. So happy holidays. Thanks, Mayor.